A warm welcome to this week's edition of The Front Page, the show from the Racing Post that takes you deep into all the big stories from the world of racing. And what a lineup we have on the show today. We'll be picking the bones out of the latest developments in the Constitution Hill saga. We'll be looking back on a wet and wild weekend in which a host of stars, including 5 of the first 6 in the Gold Cup market, were in action. We'll be assessing JP McManus's suggestions for how the Cheltenham handicaps should change, and lots more beside. For all of that, I am your host, Racing Post editor Tom Kerr. I'm delighted to be joined in the studio by Lewis Porteous. Welcome, Lewis.
Yeah, hi Tom.
And remotely over in Ireland, we have Ireland editor Richard Forristal, and we have from Lambourne our local man on the ground, Liam Headd. Welcome all, welcome to you. We're going to dive straight in and immediately turn to what was a fantastic weekend of racing. The weekend the jump season truly came to life, albeit we have been saying that for about 4 weekends now, but it keeps getting better. And yesterday at Punchestown was perhaps the most impactful and gripping race of them all in the John Durkan, as Galopin Des Champs reappeared and was toppled. He lost out to Fat to File, who stamped his authority on the staying chase division and surged into contention as a Gold Cup contender. Richie, we'll have to turn for you for this one. Give us your lowdown of the action from Punchestown yesterday and what you made of that seismic result.
Yeah, it was a fantastic race, Tom, as everyone will have seen. I suppose maybe one of the hallmarks of the staying chase division over the past year or more is the kind of connections, willingness to run the horses and let them take each other on. You're looking at Galopin Des Champs and Fast or Slow again yesterday, the 2 best staying chasers really that have been around for the past couple of seasons. And there's no hiding places with them. They keep running them, they keep letting them take each other on. They're not afraid to get them beaten. And they were beaten yesterday by 2 up-and-coming horses. I don't think Willie Mullins or Martin Brazel will be overly concerned about either of their performances. I think we've seen that over the past couple of seasons, that they can bring them forward as the season goes on. The difficulty is, of course, is that there's another couple in the mix now who are on the up. Factifile was a super staying novice chaser last year. He won the 3 mile novice, the Brown Advisory at Cheltenham. And he stepped forward yesterday brilliantly. Spillane Tower also, he won over 2 miles, 2.5 miles, 3 miles last year, a couple of grade ones thrown into the mix. And to be honest, he was nearly the horse I took out of the race yesterday over Factifile. I thought his jumping was slicker and cleaner, and I just felt he was a little bit unlucky not to get there. If they were to meet again over 3 miles, I'd nearly fancy him. The concern, of course, is, when we're looking at the Gold Cup picture as a whole, they're both owned by JP McManus, and ultimately, will they want to split them up come Cheltenham? That's a long way down the line. We'll see where they go in the meantime, and in fairness, again, the willingness to run them against each other yesterday was to be welcomed and embraced. But it was just a fantastic race. We've got the Savills at Leopardstown now to come, the King George, and then on towards Cheltenham. It's there's a whole lot to look forward to on the staying chasing scene.
And Ted Walsh admonished our colleague David Jennings for asking him about the Gold Cup afterwards. But then Ted gave a great quote on the Gold Cup saying, that race there will have no bearing whatsoever on the Gold Cup. That was 2.5 miles going right-handed, and the Gold Cup is 3 miles and 2 going left-handed. They are chalk and cheese. What do you think, Richie? Do you think, is Ted right there? Is there a danger we read too much into what went down over very different conditions at Punchestown yesterday?
Yeah, look, it's 4 or 5 months out at this stage, and it will obviously be very different. And we know that, the likes of Fast or Slow and Galopin Des Champs have plenty to work on. We also know that Spillane Tower has like Jimmy Mangan, I think, said, did he not get him on grass at all until this week?
Yeah, since the spring, he said. Since the spring, he hadn't been on grass, which is, a heck of a statement given what an eye-catching run he delivered.
That's my thought as well. Like, and to me, he looks like a stayer, and the step up and trip would be huge for him. So it's obviously early to be looking forward, but we do it. It's what we do. It's what kind of gets the juices flowing at this time of the year, as well as the prospect of what will come in March. But it was an absolute race to savour. To see the big guns coming down there together, and Galloping Deschamps and Fast and Slow, like, they've given us some spectacular spectacles, if you like, over the last couple of years. And it'll be interesting to see what they do next, because Martin Brazel had spoken about King George for Fast or Slow. No, he ultimately wasn't entered for that, which a lot of people were quite surprised about. You would wonder now, will he reconsider that and maybe consider supplementing him for the King George, because it was a race he had kind of earmarked as suitable for him. So that'll be interesting to see over the next few days if he kind of speaks on that as to whether they are going to go to King George rather than the Savills this time.
King George not looking the strongest race, but we'll turn to the pick of the British action, Lewis. We had the Betfair Chaser Haydock run on what I think we have to describe as quintessential Haydock conditions, absolutely sodden, massive test of stamina in the end. We had billed on the front page of the Racing Post on Saturday, Britain's Great Grey Hope, Grey Dawning, sort of leading the charge for Britain in the Gold Cup. If charge is not the right word, because it's kind of a one-horse charge, isn't it? It was his big audition for that role. He came up short to a absolute Haydock stalwart in Royal Pagaille. But what do we make of the run? He certainly didn't disgrace himself, did he?
He lost little in defeat, Tom. Almost feel a bit sorry for the horse. The whole of Britain, chances in the Gold Cup seem to rest on his shoulders already, and like Richie said, we're fully 4 or 5 months out. But it was a pleasing first run back. You can't say it wasn't. The problem is, if he is a genuine Gold Cup-o, you really hope that he could put a horse like Royal Pagaille away, who is a Haydock specialist and a real stalwart, but we know where he stands when it comes to the Gold Cup in March. He's not quite at that level. He's proven that. So it was a bit of a shame he couldn't put him away, but it was his first run, and when I look at that horse, I just think, I said it halfway through, I just think he's a little bit too exuberant at the moment to maybe get an extended 3 miles at Cheltenham. Now, you can start to try and harness that. The problem is you start trying to mess around with it, you then maybe dim some of his brilliance a little bit, and he just looks like one of those horses that really wants to get on with it. He jumps magnificently. He did fluff the last. It was a great first run back, but when you just look at the depth of the race in Ireland on Sunday, you do fear that it's going to be a big ask for him to find that little bit extra to maybe mix it with galloping and horses like that.
To give credit to Royal Pagaille, though, the horse absolutely loves Haydock. Form figures 1-1-2, 1-1-1. A plus tard, the only horse who's actually beaten Royal Pagaille at his beloved Haydock. And Grey Dawning, if you sort of stop the race just before the last, you think, God, it's great performance. He's won that very cosily. He's gone past Royal Pagaille very easily between the second and last. It's just after the last, he obviously makes a bit of a meal of it, and then he bottoms out. The stamina concern is a legitimate one. But I think Royal Pagaille, probably deserves credit there. And of course, fantastic scenes afterwards for the Richies, having a landmark winner, and they absolutely love the game, don't they?
Yeah, you have to say, only in January the horse broke his shoulder in the Cotswold Chase. I mean, what an incredible training performance to get him back by Venetia. He's a very hard horse to beat at Haydock, there's no doubt about it, and I don't want to take anything away from Grey Dawning. It was just that exuberance that worried me a little bit, with a Gold Cup in mind. But as for the Richies, Rich Ritchie sort of wears his heart on his sleeve. We saw that again on Saturday. It's some achievement, really. 100 Grey Ones. I had a double take on that, thinking, are you sure it's not 100 winners? But no, 100 Grey One is absolutely magnificent.
It's incredible,
it's brilliant. And 98 for Willie, I think, just 2 for Royal Pagaille. But he's I like the way as well Venetia said afterwards, like she mentioned a Peter Marsh as a to run, he might come back to Haydock and run it off a huge weight in a handicap. I mean, that's the sort of thing I really love. That's harping back to yesteryear. She's not afraid to run her horses in handicaps, Venetia. So that's another thing to look forward to. It was a great spectacle. I just don't think maybe it would have given the Irish guys too much to worry about.
Liam, quickly, your assessment of the staying chase performances from the weekend. Where did you see the advantage lying after an insightful and informative couple of days of action?
Well, I think Lewis hit the nail on the head, really. I mean, Dan Skelton said before the race that he was hoping to come out of Haydock with a genuine Gold Cup contender. I don't think his plans have changed. I think it was a brilliant run on, probably conditions that wouldn't have favoured him over Royal Pagaille. So, in that respect, I think things look bright for the season ahead. Obviously, things change. Every week it'll be interesting to see where Grey Dawning goes next. But like the lads have said, it's such a competitive sort of field, and we don't know what the Gold Cup will shape up come March. But Ireland showed plenty of depth, that, like Richard said yesterday, and it'll be interesting to see how it unfolds. We've got to get there first and foremost to Cheltenham in March, but it is wide open, especially after yesterday's result in Ireland.
Yeah, I would love to see Grey Dawning go for the King George, but Dan Skelton suggested we probably wouldn't see him for a while after what was a pretty demanding, taxing race. Let's move on to the champion hurdle picture, because we had the Morgiana Stateman defeated by Brighter Days Ahead, who did enough wrong in the race to sort of mark up that performance, perhaps. Gordon Elliott's Brighter Days Ahead now 4-1 for the champion hurdle, but Gordon Elliott suggested that the Mayor's hurdle looks like it's made for her. Words to send a chill down the back of any racing fan. Richie, what did you make of it?
Yeah, she was excellent, and I would I'd pay close attention maybe to Gordon's words. I think he said the race would be perfect for her. I don't think that necessarily means he wants to go for it. I suspect he has had the champion. Well, he has said himself that he's had the champion hurdle in mind for her. But obviously the 2.5 miles of the champion might be might be tailor-made for her. I wouldn't be surprised if he kept sticking to the champion hurdle route when the time comes, but it'll depend obviously on what happens in the meantime. As you allude to, Tom, she did plenty wrong on Saturday. She jumped to her left. She had to make her own running. I noticed when she was racing, she jumped perfectly straight, so you'd like that. She's obviously a very exciting mare. Willie will take plenty of encouragement from Stateman. He's getting older. He's always been a kind of horse that carries plenty of condition. I think, he's always been that way. So I wouldn't worry too much about him. I think he'll step forward again. And it's going to throw forward to Saturday. Obviously, we've now got Sergino staying at over hurdles, and we have Mystical Power also going to Newcastle for the Fighting Fifth. So that's going to be fascinating. Again, like the staying chase division, we're going to have a situation here where you have a number of horses owned by the same owners. So like we have Lossy Mouse owned by Rich Ritchie. Mystical Power will be carrying Rich Ritchie's colours this year. Sergino and Stateman owned by the Donnellys. So you just wonder if down the road that will ultimately have an effect on where they end up being targeted at. But hopefully this weekend we will see all those kind of intending to go to the Fighting Fifth turn up there, and we get another good race hopefully.
Richard, one last question about the weekend action. The other sort of superstar who was in action was Ballyburn. Straightforward. Did we learn anything?
Sure, we learned that he's fitting well. That's always good. He jumped well. I wasn't entirely sure what to make of it. He's obviously got a huge engine. I don't know what sort of horse he is yet. I'm not sure Willie knows. We'll just have to maybe give him another run and see. He was talking about the old Racing Post novice chase at Leopardstown not being there. So, the thought of going back and trip is in his head. It'll be interesting to see what he does with him, because he obviously has a very high cruising speed and he would be comfortable going back to that trip. But I just wondered if at times he lacked a little bit of scope when he was long and so on. But we won't really find out about that until he starts racing alongside something and is taken on. When his jumping is put under a little bit of pressure, what sort of scope has he? So it was a very comprehensive, fluent performance and all that. But he did what he had to do. I genuinely kind of found it hard to draw too many conclusions. I'd like to see him again before we make any kind of judgment on it.
Thanks, Richie. We will be back in a minute to talk all things Constitution Hill after another dramatic week in the former champion hurdler's career. First of all, though, a quick commercial break, and we'll see you in a second. Welcome back. We now turn to the latest in the Constitution Hill saga. We were supposed to be seeing the former champion hurdler make his seasonal reappearance this weekend in Newcastle's Fighting Fifth, but alas, that will now not happen. A dramatic week for Constitution Hill began with a gallops morning at Newbury on Tuesday, and not for the first time. A racecourse gallop ended in less than satisfactory manner. Liam Headd, our Lambourne correspondent, the only full-time journalist based in Lambourne, was at Newbury to witness events and spoke to Nicky Henderson after the gallop. Liam, can you take us through what unfolded at Newbury on Tuesday?
Yeah, so we obviously anticipated to see Constitution Hill back doing what he loves best at Newbury on Tuesday. Obviously, he had a morning gallop with stablemate Sir Gino. And, first and foremost, we thought that we were going to see something a lot more substantial than what we've seen. It was interesting afterwards, after the gallop, obviously speaking to Nico de Boinville, Michael Bucklin, Nicky Henderson, they all seemed pleased to get him back out on a racetrack first and foremost. Obviously, it's been a while since we last seen him. Obviously, the Christmas hurdle was the last time we seen him competitively on a racetrack. So it was interesting to sort of digress after the gallop, just to see how connections were feeling. They both, Nico and Nicky Henderson, both agreed that the gallop would bring him an awful lot on for the Fighting Fifth. Obviously, a lot has happened since then. We now learn that he's reported to be lame at Seven Barrows, and unfortunately, he's not going to take his chance on Saturday, which is a great shame for racing fans. But it's important to realise that he has been off for quite a while. So there is a lot more to come from him, we hope. So it's interesting to see what happens over the next few days. I'm sure we're going to get more updates on Constitution Hill and where he's at. But it is a great shame for racing fans that we won't see him return on Saturday for the Fighting Fifth.
And what is the latest, Liam? What's the current prognosis for Constitution Hill?
Well, we first realised on Friday when Nicky Henderson sent out a statement on social media. He reported him to be lame. He said everything was fine after the morning gallop. He came out of it in good form, but 48 hours after they did tests after some small issues at Seven Barrows and reported him to be lame and that the Fighting Fifth on Saturday was an unlikely target. Now, since then, we've learned that he's had some bruising on his pastern that Lewis reported, and that the Fighting Fifth will come too soon for him. It's important to realise that these things take time. We're probably going to learn, I'd say, this week more on what the issues are. I think the good feeling is that it doesn't seem to be anything more serious than it is. But unfortunately, it does mean that we won't see him back out on Saturday.
And also that the Christmas hurdle, I think, is now in question. We should learn more this week, you're right, but there's a possibility that this setback will mean that Constitution Hill misses his Kempton target as well, which would be more than a year off the track. Yeah, exactly. And I think Nicky Henderson said to the media a few days ago that this sort of issue, firstly, his vets has never seen anything like this in 40 odd years, but this sort of issue could take 3 days to resolve itself, or it could take 3 weeks. Now,
if it is the latter, Nicky Henderson said that the Christmas hurdle at Kempton would also come too soon. So, I'm sure we're going to get some more developments this week, which will sort of give us an indication of where we may see him next. But then the question comes that if he does miss his target of the Christmas hurdle, what options do open up for him in the new year? So a lot will depend on what comes out of Seven Barrows this week. But let's hope it is for the better, and we do see him back on a racetrack again.
Yeah, Lewis. Lots of rightfully Nicky getting praise for being open and upfront about the situation with the Constitution Hill, both at Tuesday at Newbury, but also when the news emerged on Friday that the horse was lame. However, we have to note as well that before that statement was released, the horse was a big drifter on Betfair for the Fighting Fifth, and social media sort of lit up with people sort of saying, A, he's not going to run, and B, joking about getting the printer turned on at Seven Barrows so we could get one of those classic printed press releases. Of course, this time he did a video. These things do happen, and it's very hard, I guess, for trainers to sort of police them, but it is quite unsatisfactory as well when we sort of learn about the comings or goings of a star horse via betting exchange movements.
The drift shouldn't tell the story, is the bottom line. We knew it was coming before the statement comes out. So that it's really disappointing. It's very hard to police, is what I would say. And I don't really blame Nicky. I guess when he's going off to do his video, maybe he's then come out there, I'm going to do this video because Constitution Hill, and so the world we live in now, it's seconds before that goes out and people are straight on the machine. So there's no doubt about it. It's disappointing. We want transparency. We don't want to learn things through bet exchanges. How you police that is incredibly hard, Tom.
It is, yeah. Constitution Hill has now been, he's going to be off the track for at least a year. He's had a few issues. He's had a couple of disappointing gallops. He's now had a setback, which as Liam communicated there, is something which has sort of bemused the vets at Seven Barrows who've never seen the likes of it in their career. Is he just an incredibly unlucky horse? He was incredibly lucky to that point. He was unbeaten, but he seems all of a sudden to be very fragile. From almost nowhere, from that Kempton gallop, he just seems to have turned into a very fragile individual, which is a real shame. I think, speaking to Nicky on Saturday, they were pleased to have discovered this bruising. They can then pinpoint why maybe the gallop was a little bit underwhelming, but. The problem is you've had sort of a respiratory infection, you've had a wind operation, you've got a bruised pastern. It just seems like a catalogue of things going wrong, and the longer this draws out, the more questions do ask, will we see him again? The thing is, you can tell Nicky wants to get him back on track, and they are doing everything they can, and credit to that, and it is kind of keeping us entertained as well along the way. I do feel a little bit like there's a lot of people queuing up to say I told you so when he doesn't run again. Like, I'll make this clear, I really hope we get this horse back. He's so good for racing. I want to see him on a racetrack, and I know Nicky's going to try, but the longer it lasts, people are bound to ask that question. Richie, you wrote a column last week in between the gallops and the news about the lameness, basically saying it was going to take one of Nicky Henderson's magician's moments to get Constitution Hill back to the standard he was at before. I guess what's happened since has only reinforced the mountain that he has to climb now.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can throw Colic into the mix as well there, Lewis. Unfortunately, that was another one. And look, I know Nicky Henderson, he kind of, I think some of our infatuation with Constitution Hill and what's happening with him probably grates with Nicky a bit. But we all just want to see this horse because he was so electric when he was at the top of his game. And he referenced Sprinter Sacra and how, that horse had a real problem that he had to come back from, that this horse hasn't had a problem per se, but various little things go wrong. But when you put the respiratory infection together, along with the poor gallop, the colic, and now this, it's a catalogue of little things that are holding him up. He's only 7 years of age. You'd like to think he will come back. But there's also the breathing issue then with him as well. I wonder if that's quite a significant problem. We don't really know. We know they had he underwent surgery in the summer for it, and that's not insignificant. The 2 times we've seen the horse kind of come off the bridle on the race course were in his last 2 gallops, and neither time went very well, did they? Every other time he's been on a racetrack when he was doing things within himself, he was perfectly comfortable. We don't know again, like whether the injury impacted his gallop the other day or whether it kind of emerged afterwards. He didn't show anything before, so we don't know kind of which way, the sequence of events there, if you like. And I don't think Nicky knows whether the bruised pastern impacted his gallop or whether that emerged after it. You know what I mean? It might have been there impacting the horse. I don't think anyone really knows that. So the whole saga is just, it's he was a horse that we hadn't seen the like of really since Istabrack. When you're talking about 2-mile hurdlers, he was that good. He looked that exceptional, and he seemed bulletproof. He didn't seem to have any vulnerabilities, and all of a sudden, as Lewis says, he looks quite fragile. So I don't know. I mean, my colleague the other day kind of said it's going to require another act of Nicky Henderson's revered sorcery, as you said, Tom. That's the case at the moment, isn't it? He's got a long road to come back. I can't, it's going to be hard for him to come back by Christmas to be fit enough to run in a Christmas hurdle. I hope to see it. I would love to see it. And if not, I'd love to see him come back as soon as possible after that. But he's a horse that's had a lot of problems now. And the one thing I don't know about really is how much his breathing is impacting him. They felt the need to have surgery done on him in the summer. And how much is that an issue at the moment? We don't really know, and we won't know kind of on the track until he comes off the bridle and has a race. So it's very much up in the air. It's a real wide open cap and hurdle market as a result of it, as we discussed earlier.
It certainly is. And Liam, just final word to you. You'll obviously be keeping very close to this story, tracking, not quite sleeping in the same box as Constitution Hill, but probably just right outside it. But you also brought us the news that Sir Gino would go for the fighting 5th. So Nicky Henderson with a high-class replacement.
Yeah, exactly. And I think once we knew that something wasn't right with Constitution Hill, the more important or the more significant news to the story was the fact that Sir Gino had come in for a lot of support for the fighting 5th on Saturday. Now, Nicky Henderson didn't know on Friday whether Sir Gino would take his chance as a replacement for Constitution Hill, but I think a lot of people thought that would be the case, given that Nicky Henderson has a good record in the race, and Sir Gino is a brilliant replacement. He's obviously proven his class last season. Winning a Grade 1. In my opinion, he would have won the Triumph Hurdle had he taken his chance at Cheltenham. But we know some things weren't right with the Seven Barrows team around that time. So, it's important to realise that Nicky Henderson has another strong hold of this race with Sir Gino, and that battle. I know we're still a few days away yet from the fighting 5th, but if both him and the likes of Mystical Power both take their chance on Saturday, then we're in for a great battle so early on in the season.
Thanks, Liam. We will keep you updated with all the news on Constitution Hill, and Liam brings you all the news from Lambourn. A lot of that is in our Members Club Ultimate Package, which is our top tier subscription, gives you access to all of our journalism, digital newspaper, race replays, and a host of other features, and you can learn more about it right now. welcome back. We're now going to turn to another fantastic column which was featured in our Members Club Ultimate Package, and this was a guest column by none other than legendary owner and punter JP McManus, who wanted to share some thoughts about changes he would make, particularly to the Cheltenham Festival handicaps. JP suggested that the maximum field size for the handicap should be brought down to a maximum of 18, and the rationale for this, he said, was that by doing so you would encourage more owners, including himself, to run their horses ahead of Cheltenham, needing to ensure that their marks got to a certain level in order to be guaranteed a spot at Cheltenham. Richie, what do we think of this proposal? It seems a sensible way to try to boost field sizes before Cheltenham. Of course, some would sort of bemoan the loss of some of that competitive edge at the festival itself.
Yeah, it was interesting. Yeah, it was good calling, Tom, of course, and JP's line about wanting owners and trainers, if you like, and horses to show their hand was kind of the relevant one, so that they go there as slightly more open books, if you like. Obviously, handicapping is an art form all of its own. I can see the merit to it. I can see also how it might ultimately help races away from the festival. It might deepen those fields a bit more potentially. My concern though would be again that if you do something like this, who loses out? The guys further down the food chain again. And we've already seen over the past decade or so how the bigger yards are also kind of cornering a lot of the handicaps, which obviously didn't used to be the case. They were very much kind of a free-for-all. If you had a half-decent horse, you had a chance. But the way the game has kind of condensed around the smaller number of operations, they're also farming a lot of the big handicaps, as we know. So I just had a quick sconce through kind of the lower-rated horses in the various handicaps at the festival this year. And you're talking ultimately, I'll just run through them quickly. You're talking about horses running for Nigel Twiston-Davies, Nicky Richards, Richard Hobson, John Murphy, Ollie Murphy, Benicia, Jamie Snowden. Mel Rowley had a second with Kintara in the Pertemps this year. Eric McNamara, Sheila Lewis had a horse placed in the plate. Strawfan Jack, Joe Tizard, Paul Nolan, David Bridgewater, Sheena West, Keane Collins, Philip Kirby, Jimmy Moffat. They are the kind of trainers that will ultimately be impacted if you condense the handicaps even more, which is ultimately what would happen. So that would be my concern. You see why JP is making the point. You would love to see horses going there kind of a bit more exposed, if you like, so that punters could have a better handle on how the race is going to shape up. But ultimately, I would be concerned about anything that reduces the amount of opportunities in those handicaps for the smaller trainers. Cheltenham, in the upper echelons, should always be about the best taking on the best. That's the kind of thing I've been talking a lot about over the years. We have too many options there for trainers to dodge and swerve and to take the easy option. But when it comes to handicaps, you want to see everybody be able to aspire to have a winner there and to have a chance there. And if you reduce the number of horses allowed, it's those down at the bottom end will ultimately be cut out.
Thanks, Richard. Perfect illustration there of how there are no easy answers in racing. To close the show, we're going to turn to the other side of the world and the week's most notable international race, which is the Japan Cup, watched by 80,000 fanatical spectators who cheered home the 55-year-old Yutaki Take on Dojus, a fantastic ride to win the Japan Cup, with Auguste Rodin unable to seal his career with a famous victory in the Japan Cup. However, he did get the honour of a remarkable retirement ceremony, a concept which the Japanese have embraced, and 15,000 fans stayed behind to watch Auguste Rodin, a son of Deep Impact, the famous Japanese sire, being given his farewell. Lewis, always the most amazing thing about the Japan Cup is watching the videos. Hopefully we can show some now. You get that classic sort of sprint from the gates as some of the most fanatical fans come in to grab prime positions, and of course 15,000 people staying behind for a retirement ceremony. It's absolutely unthinkable here. As passionate as we get on race courses, and as big as the crowds become, the idea that people would stay behind for a retirement ceremony is just a non-starter. It's fantastic to see it, and it truly gives you a flavour of what racing in Japan is all about.
Yeah, what a spectacle. I mean, the retirement party was fully 2 hours after racing closed, and they all stayed around for it solely on the basis of the saga. So they take a huge sort of, they really embrace the breeding side of it. It's just, yeah, you look on with a bit of envy, don't you? You just think they get it so right over there, put on a great show. I love the people sprinting to the seats, that maybe, I don't know, 10 in the morning, whatever. You just never see it. Didn't see it at Ascot on Saturday for sure. But no, it's brilliant. It was a bit of a shame August Rodin didn't finish with a bit more oomph. He went out with a little bit of a whimper, but it's hard to go over there and win. It was quite a slowly run race, yet the winner came from last. It's a real sort of specialist kind of racing out there, and a worthy winner from with a legend in the saddle, Yutaka Taki. But I know, yeah, you see, it's one of them places you watch and think, I'd love to go and savour that.
Completely, and also the madness, the fanaticism going beyond the racecourse as well, because we had a surreal situation where Goliath's Connections had a sort of impromptu merchandise handout, I think, which even the police had to sort of get involved because there was 1,000 people turned up. I think even Connections, having anticipated only a few dozen hardcore individuals would attend that. It's just extraordinary, this sort of cultural resonance racing has in Japan.
Oh, fanatical, absolutely fanatical. Yeah, it's almost like the nation's sport. That's what it's got to, and there's lessons to be learned from everything they do from the foundations up, really.
Certainly is. Thanks very much, Lewis, and thank you as well to my other guests, Richard Forristal and Liam Headd, and thank you to you at home for tuning in. That's all we've got time for this week, but we will be back again next Monday with all the latest on all the big stories in racing. Until then, thank you again, and goodbye.